what's the Browns' plan on Myles Garrett? Hold on to him, hope that Myles has a change of heart, or just say hold on to him, and that's the end of that. Tom, what's their plan?
Well, what the Browns have said behind the scenes is that they're not going to trade Myles Garrett. My understanding is they've gotten calls. People are not necessarily getting calls back from the Browns about Myles Garrett right now. He's a really, unique player. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's one of the, the great players in all of Browns history at this point, as a former Defensive Player of the Year and still very much in his prime at this stage. However, these things can evolve. That's their stance right now. Myles Garrett has said he feels like they're a long way away from competing. Are there things that could happen in free agency, in the draft, that would change his mind? The real pressure points here with Myles Garrett, the main one is going to arrive at the draft. And that's not to say something couldn't happen tomorrow. I mean, if the Browns decide they want to trade him, they'll have a bunch of teams lined up trying to trade for the guy. But the real pivot point would be the draft, because if you're going to trade a Myles Garrett, you are going to get premier draft capital in return, and you're not going to want to hold him until camp and then be trading for draft capital that can't help you in 2025. So we probably still have weeks remaining in the Myles Garrett situation. Again, at this point, the Browns don't want to trade him. He's going to command top dollar wherever he's playing. The Browns stand ready to pay him, just like, Micah Parsons is looking for top dollar. Max Crosby is up for a new deal. Trey Hendrickson's up for a new deal. Aiden Hutchinson is eligible for a new deal. You're talking about a bunch of guys who are all going to, in all likelihood, or at least be trying to top Nick Bosa's nearly $35 million average. So, that marketplace as a whole, with all the edge rushers that are available or potentially available, or have, 10 situations looming here in the future, for Myles Garrett, he does have the benefit of time. There's no rush. He doesn't need to be on the roster someplace else in a week here. But I do imagine as we get closer to the draft, if something hasn't happened already, that's when the Browns are going to have to, either dig in their heels even more or potentially, cede that position. So far, they haven't done it.
Cap going up, make it more likely that the Bengals do pull off their Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Trey Hendrickson trifecta for Joe Burrow. Tom?
Well, again, the cap is going up for everybody, and so these numbers are only going up. I've had conversations in recent days about, what does a Jamar Chase contract look like? Because Justin Jefferson, obviously, that was a significant market reset last year when the Vikings gave him 4 years and $140 million, a $35 million average. The Bengals were in that neighborhood, but the Bengals have had a contract structure that's different, lump sum signing bonus, no future guarantees. And they just weren't able to close that gap last fall. So now if you're Jamar Chase, is that deal 36 a year? Is that deal 40 a year? Those are some of the unanswered questions. His agent also now represents T. Higgins, who at this point the Bengals are trying to get a long-term deal done with. My understanding is if they can't get a deal done prior to March 4th, it's likely that they are going to franchise tag him. You would anticipate that to continue to try to work out a long-term deal, in part because the Bengals almost never trade anybody, but you also can't rule out the possibility of a tag and trade that would bring in more draft assets that you could use to rebuild the defense and also free up a bunch of capital in terms of cap resources and cash resources that you otherwise would have been putting into T. Higgins to get something done with Jamar Chase and then also get something done with Trey Hendrickson. We know where Joe Burrow stands in this. He wants all these guys back. He doesn't want to be blowing it up right now. But, these are some of the moving parts. It's going to be expensive. There's other teams that have really top-heavy caps in terms of, the 49ers have been maxed out with a bunch of guys at the top for their positions in recent years. The Cowboys, they've made public comments about, is it realistic to get a Micah Parsons deal done when you're paying Dak $60 a year and CeeDee Lamb $34.5 a year? As much as, yes, the cap's going up, the cap is still a real thing. Every dollar you spend hits the cap eventually here. And so these are some of the decisions. It's not, we all consider and say, get your best players done. Just sign them, give them whatever they want. But that does have a trickle-down effect on what you're doing with the rest of the roster and how good of a full team you can ultimately build.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.